مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. مفتوحة أم مغلقة؟ مغلقة أم مفتوحة؟ مفتوحة للمدارس الابتدائية ومغلقة للمدارس الثانوية. مفتوحة يومان في الأسبوع ومغلوقة 3 أيام في الأسبوع. اختبارات أم لا اختبارات؟ فن أم لا فن؟ موسيقى أم لا موسيقى؟ رياضة أم لا رياضة؟ تخارج أم لا تخارج؟ وتستمر القائمة. إدارة نظام أمريكا التعليمي مهمة حافلة بالتحديات في أفضل الأوقات، وهذه ليس بالتأكيد أفضل الأوقات. خلافاً للمعظم الدول، نحن لا نملك نظاماً تعليمياً قومياً مركزياً. كل مقاطعة ومدينة وبلدة وقرية على مستوى الدولة تتحكم في نظامها التعليمي الخاص، ولكن ما يزال للحكومة الفيدرالية تأثيرها، لأنها تتحكم في مليارات الدولارات التي يتم إنفاقها على التعليم، والنتيجة هي علاقة متوترة بين واشنطن والمجتمعات المحلية حول كيف تدار الطريقة التي تعمل بها مدارسنا وكيف يتعلم أطفالنا. لمناقشة مستقبل التعليم في أمريكا خلال الجائحة وبعدها، يسرني أن أرحب بالخبرين من منظورين مختلفين، الصحفي إريك كيلدرمان والسيد ترافيس ويبي مدير إحدى المدارس. Welcome back to Dakhel Washington. We have a lot of heated topics in American politics, but there's probably none more heated than education. After all, this is about the future of our children. And so to talk about education in America today, from the local level all the way to national policy issues, I'm delighted to welcome 2 outstanding experts. One, Principal Travis Wiebe of an elementary school in Montgomery County, Maryland, and Eric Kelderman, a journalist and expert in education policy. Travis, Eric, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
So, Travis, let me just begin with you quickly. How are you and your school faring during this pandemic?
So we have been all virtual since March 16th, and I would say we are faring as well as we could be under the circumstances that we find ourselves. So we are fortunate in Montgomery County, Maryland, to have the technology and resources and support necessary to ensure that all of our students have access to Chromebooks and to various technology tools. We have been on Zoom early on, and so teachers are teaching and students are learning. It's certainly not anything that I would hope for. My ultimate goal would be for us to be back in school if we could do so safely. But you know, there are a lot of good successes that we've seen. Some students are really doing really well. Others, unfortunately, you know, this has been particularly challenging. So those students who, and teachers, quite frankly, who are on Zoom for basically 6 hours a day with an hour and a half break for lunch and wellness, it becomes a struggle for anyone. As adults certainly can relate to the idea of Zoom fatigue. Our children certainly can too, especially those that have really not been exposed to a lot of screen time. So, you know, overall we are hanging in there, but it is definitely not something I saw coming necessarily.
Absolutely. And Eric, when you hear reactions from around the country to how so many schools have had to go online, generally, are parents satisfied with how school systems have handled this challenge, or does it differ on ages, localities, regions of the country?
I think parents are you know, I cover colleges and universities, but I pay attention to the elementary and secondary school stuff that is handled by Travis. You know, my take on that is that parents are unhappy with the situation, not necessarily because of the school system's response, but because they're juggling, you know, their own jobs if they're working from home, and also then trying to help their children online, especially if they're younger. It's very difficult. Kids might have very short attention spans, and it's certainly not an ideal situation for them to be sitting in front of a computer screen trying to interact with people for 6 hours a day. At the upper levels, there's probably I would say less parental dissatisfaction. At the college and university level, most colleges and universities are primarily online at this point. About a quarter of them are teaching fully or primarily in person. The rest are doing something either hybrid, where they have some in-person classes and some online. And there, again, it's not ideal for the students or the faculty members that I've been in touch with. It's just a big change in the system, and I think people are ready to get back to what they think of as normal at some point.
So let me ask, who makes the basic decisions about issues like whether schools are open or closed, universities are open or closed? How much of this is a national, a state, a county, a local? Or Travis, do you decide what happens in your own school? How are decisions actually made?
Well, I'll tell you from my perspective, at least within Maryland and Montgomery County, the decision to close schools was done in partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services. And so, again, our health director locally, based on the COVID rates and data, made a recommendation to the school system, and ultimately we follow their guidance. And then at the state level, early on, there was certainly the state superintendent of education had originally sort of closed the schools. But as we are looking toward reopening, we are partnering closely with our local health and human services. As Eric alluded to, we continue to see spikes in the rates, at least across the country, but certainly locally here in Montgomery County and in the state of Maryland, where we have certain metrics that we're looking at, and we're nowhere near meeting them in terms of a return to school at this point.
And so if that's the situation in your county, Eric, more nationally, we must have a real patchwork of systems. Is that right?
So in the United States, you and your listeners might know that we don't have a sort of a Ministry of Education the way many other countries do. So the federal government has, in many ways, surprisingly little control over the day-to-day operations and the curriculum and the teaching and things like that happen on schools and in college campuses. So it's very diffuse. There's local school systems have a lot of authority. Those are governed by state departments of education. Public colleges and universities have governing boards and presidents of their institutions, and are under state law. Typically, that's where primarily the way they are regulated. So there's quite a patchwork across the nation.
Fascinating. So let me ask, let me pull away a bit from the pandemic and talk more generally about education, the delivery of education, and how it connects to our national election. We're in the middle of a change of administrations. So let's first just talk about the outgoing Trump administration. First, Travis, at the local level, does Washington have any impact at all on the delivery of education at your elementary school, or let's say even in Montgomery County?
I would say overall there is, as Eric alluded to, very little influence from a federal perspective in terms of what actually occurs on a daily basis within schools. Certainly there is a small percentage of the school system's budget that is federal. I believe it's around 3% of a $2.3 billion budget that often is connected to what are called Title I schools, or schools that are more impacted by poverty. So there's some additional federal funding that goes toward that reduces class size and things like that. And then there are other pieces along the way. But in terms of what is actually taught on a daily basis from a curriculum perspective, there's very little influence that comes from Washington. And it is, as Eric alluded to, very much determined locally. So Montgomery County Public Schools has a Board of Education that ultimately decides in collaboration with the superintendent of schools and the staff, sort of what is the curriculum. And then we follow what is called something called the Common Core State Standards. So our standards are based on a sort of consortium of states across the country. And Maryland is also involved to some degree, but ultimately, my teachers teach to the curriculum that is approved by the school board here in Montgomery County.
And Eric, I know that the Trump administration had a Department of Education that had a certain view about the role of public education and certain ideas about, what should be taught, how things should be taught. Did it trickle down in other places? If not in Montgomery County, then in other parts of the country that you might have followed?
I don't want to grade the administration, certainly, or the Secretary of Education or the department's response. The people I talk to have been pretty unhappy with the administration's approach, in particular to higher education. The approach of deregulation, I think, is seen as a way to favor for-profit institutions and disadvantage what we think of as traditional public and private nonprofit institutions, which make up the vast majority of higher education in the country. That issue, plus the attention to the how colleges and universities in particular handle sexual harassment under what are called the Title IX rules. That was a law that was passed in the 70s to ensure gender equity in athletics, but is expanded now to include things like sexual misconduct in schools and colleges. And the administration has taken a very different view of that, and in many ways made it harder for people who have been harassed or assaulted to bring claims against against the people who have harmed them.
So, Travis, let me just ask you, when it comes to actually running your school, hiring teachers, making decisions about how things operate, are you the boss?
I would say it depends. So certainly from a hiring perspective, I ultimately make a recommendation to hire a candidate based on what we call our Human Resources Office. So centrally, we have a Human Resources Office here in Montgomery County that screens candidates and makes available for hire certain candidates. I then advertise a position. I interview the candidates that I feel would be best suited, and I make a recommendation and I hire the teachers that are in my building, for the most part without too much involvement of the school system or central office. They certainly, from a state perspective, have to be certified to teach in the particular content area, which is, they have to have gone to school and meet the criteria from a state perspective to have a Maryland State Teaching Certificate. But yes, I get to hire the teachers. I evaluate the teaching staff based on the standards that are set forth by the county. If I have a teacher who is not meeting standard, then there is quite a cumbersome process to follow that is heavily involved in terms of what we call our teachers union, that has quite a bit of influence in terms of what the teacher contract says and things like that. But on a day-to-day basis, yes, I am in charge of the building. It is my responsibility to make sure that all the teachers are teaching and the students are learning, and that the building is clean, and all of those little nuances that go with managing a large elementary school.
All right, when we come back after the break, I wanted to ask both of you about something you just referenced, Travis, and that is teacher unions. I think one of the big changes that we're going to see with the shift from the Trump to the Biden administration will be a rebalance of power and influence of unions. And we're going to talk about that with both of you when we return after this break. We've had 58 presidential elections in American history, 45 different presidential administrations, and 44 different presidents. One person, Grover Cleveland, served 2 non-consecutive terms and is considered to have 2 different administrations. But in all that time, we have never had the current situation before, a situation in which the incumbent claims massive fraud and says he would never accept the universally accepted results of the election. So let's go to the movies. I can't think of anything quite like what we're seeing today, but here's 2 films that should at least give some entertaining respite from the headlines, with a bit of insight along the way. First is Recount, the Emmy Award-winning 2008 HBO special movie about the Florida vote face-off between legal teams for Al Gore and George W. Bush that ended in the Supreme Court ruling for a Bush victory. And then there's Man of the Year, a 2006 comedy drama starring Robin Williams as a comedian elected president, thanks to a computer bug in the nationwide electronic voting system. One reality, one fantasy, both an escape from the surreality of our current political moment. Again, my guests today include Travis Wiebe. Travis is the principal of Wingate Elementary School in Montgomery County Public Schools, our nation's 14th largest school system. This is not far from where I'm taping this show today, and not coincidentally, the county in which my children attended public schools. Mr. Wiebe began his career as an elementary school teacher, teaching 1st, 3rd, and 4th grades. And you thought solving Middle East peace was hard. Also joining us today is Eric Kelderman. Eric is senior reporter for the Chronicle of Higher Education, widely recognized as our nation's leading education journal. He's reported there since 2008, covering a wide range of subjects, including money and accountability in higher education, state policy, accreditation, and legal affairs. In his spare time, Eric volunteers as a dog walker for the Washington Animal Rescue League. All right, gentlemen, let me ask you about the teachers' union, the waxing and waning of power of one of the most important institutions in education today. What role do unions play in the delivery of our education to our kids, and how do you expect this to change, perhaps with the transition from a Trump to a Biden administration? Let me start with you, Eric.
Well, right now there's a very, very bad relationship between teachers' unions and the administration. And I should say here that unions are not in every school system or on every campus. There are states in the U.S. that are called right-to-work states, where unions are generally prohibited from operating and organizing labor. But on the national level, certainly the national organizations that oversee the unions or that organize the unions have a very bad relationship with the current administration. That is very likely to improve.
Travis, you used to be a teacher. I assume you used to be part of the teachers union. Now that you're management, do you see things differently?
Yes, I do, actually. It's been a very interesting time. So traditionally, Montgomery County has had a very strong relationship with the various unions. You know, as a principal, I'm also a member of a union. And then we also have, for our support professionals, SEIU Local 500, which is a union for them. But as a teacher, certainly I was involved, not to a large degree. I just was a dues-paying member and didn't really see a whole lot of impact in terms of my day-to-day experience. the teachers union now, I would say, in the last few years, at least in Montgomery County, has been struggling a little bit in terms of being more combative in their process for negotiating. So they went from what was, a very friendly sort of bargaining style to one that is more impact related, and so the relationship has shifted over the years, at least between the school system administration and the union. So as a principal, I certainly see plenty of positives in terms of the way in which they negotiate salaries and benefits and things like that. But as I alluded to earlier, when it does come to the evaluation of teachers, and when you are dealing with either mediocre or ineffective teachers or staff, I would say that sometimes the union can be a barrier to that, in that removing a teacher who is ineffective is not as simple as sort of ending things. It is a very cumbersome, often multi-year process.
All right, gentlemen, Travis, Eric, thank you very much for discussing the state of education in America with our viewers abroad. Thank you. Of all the big debates in American politics, few are as heated or as personal as the fight over education. After all, this is about our kids. In reality, the fight over education is many fights. One fight concerns jurisdiction. Who controls education? The federal government, the states, the counties, or local cities, towns, and communities? In reality, every level of government plays a role because there's money coming from everywhere, from federal spending to local property tax assessments. And everyone with a financial stake wants a seat at the decision-making table. Another fight concerns the issue of choice. Should government be supportive, opposed to, or indifferent to whether parents choose to send children to public school or private school? Should government in any way support private schools with services or even funding? When the private schools in question are parochial schools, schools operated by religious groups or denominations, does that cross a constitutional line separating religion and state? And does such support in general necessarily detract from the potential success of public schools? And then there's the fight about cost. Public school in America is free. Should public colleges and universities be free too? If everything is free, will it still be valued? Is society better off when everyone goes to college and has the college experience? Or should we channel some students to trades and other occupations that don't require a college degree? Is it fair for some kids to be born in states where public colleges are free and others to be born in states where public colleges still charge tuition? That begs a more basic question. Not all states spend equally on education, with some states spending many times more than others. Is that fair to the kids? How do we solve this? And none of this even begins to touch the biggest issues schools face today, dealing with the pandemic. Open or closed, closed or open every day or just some days, hybrid or online. And what do you do when some schools are open, but teachers are forced to stay home, either because they're worried about their own exposure to the virus, or because they need to take care of an ill relative, or just to take care of children whose own schools may be closed? It can give you a headache just to think about it. Everything in education is complicated in America. But as someone who went to public high school and who has had kids at every level of public school, I can say that, complications aside, the system does work, at least sometimes, the way it's supposed to. In a country of 330 million people, with more than 50 million kids in public schools, that's no small achievement. بهذا نصل لنهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، وخاصة حول أثر الجائحة على التعليم في أمريكا، أرجو أن تتواصلوا معي عبر تويتر على هاشتاج Inside Washington أو عن تراسلوني مباشرة على @RobSatloff. سأراكم الأسبوع المقبل وإلى أن ألقاكم. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.